Hi, this is Peter Godinez, your ambassador with KADYTV.com, and we are launching 2018 Good Morning Oxnard. So good morning, Oxnard. And we are so fortunate, I'm trying to calm down, excited. We actually have Scott Whitney, who is actually the Chief of Police of the City of Oxnard, and is also now the interim City Manager of Oxnard.
That's right.
And you are so many other things, Scott, so we're just going to kind of break into this thing.
Awesome. So good morning.
Good morning, and I want to say we are at Tomas's restaurant here on 8th Street in Oxnard. I just had breakfast. Hopefully I don't have anything on me here, and it's a good thing, so thank you.
Was that the best?
The best.
Tomas Cafe, the best.
Can you feel his presence
Tom.
over to the right? And it's all good. But Scott, there's a lot of people who know who you are and things like that, but there's some people who may not. But one thing I know about it is you were born here, and such the story goes that Scott Whitney, once upon a time, began in Oxnard.
Yep.
So, can you give us a little idea of where you were born,
sure.
that journey?
Yeah, and I love to talk about it because I think it helps you become a better police officer. It's what we're looking for in police officers is being connected to the community. So I love telling the story. Born and raised here in Oxnard. I have 2 brothers, 2 sisters. Come from a working class family. My parents were both born and raised in North Dakota. They were like farming, ranching, like working class, like they actually worked in the fields. They traveled, you know, families moved around with the crops as well. They lived in North Dakota, Oregon, Washington, up there. Not a lot of opportunities. So my dad, as soon as he graduated from high school, joined the Navy. Came back to Oregon, that's where he met his mom. There was construction jobs in California, specifically Southern California. They moved to LA, and then in 1961 they moved to Oxnard. So that's kind of like...
That's when you came into the scene here.
That's right. So, like I said, all my brothers and sisters went to the public schools here in Oxnard. For me, I went to, Ramona, Sierra Linda, Fremont, and Oxnard High School. Those were my 4 schools. So it's pretty cool. Last week we went to, we try to connect with all of the elementary schools. It's such a great way for police departments to connect with the community, through the kids. So in about an hour, we can connect with several hundred kids and then all of their parents. So we show up. Anyways, pretty cool showing up at Sierra Linda and telling the kids there. First of all, I always ask, how many of you want to be police officers? And like every single hand goes up, right? Because now they have that positive connection.
Yes.
And the reality is that most of us, when we think about what jobs we want, it's like, what are we exposed to? So now every one of those kids has a positive experience with a police officer. So getting a little off track
No,
here.
not at all.
Anyways, when I'm able to say, yeah, I went to this school, I went to Sierra Linda, like their eyes just blow up. They don't they see kind of an old guy like me in uniform. They just don't make a connection that there's something similar, So I love telling that story. So graduated from Oxnard High School. I was supposed to go play football on scholarship.
Okay, football was your sport.
Yeah, football. Baseball, my dad wanted me to play baseball. I played, both sports when I was a kid, but high school coach convinced me that football was a sport.
No, you look like a quarterback, but let's...
Yeah,
I knew it. My first guess.
I should have been a quarterback.
Tom Brady, you have...
Yeah, I should have. If I would have played at a different school, maybe, but I actually played in my 4 years in high school every position on offense except for quarterback.
This would show your future as to what you'd be doing, like any position on the team.
So 10 positions on offense, on defense, I played like 7 out of the 11 if you're into sports. The only position I didn't play was defensive back. So anyways, had an injury, broke both bones in my lower leg, and so I ended up going to a junior college, played there for a couple years, and I transferred up to the University of Oregon. I was good at school, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. At that point, I had no idea what I wanted to do in my career. Didn't have a lot of exposure. The only thing I really knew was construction. That's what my dad did.
Really?
So I figured, well, I'm going to get my degree in business. So I got my bachelor's degree in finance with a secondary subject in accounting. So that's,
wow.
And I figured, at some point in my career, this will help me, right? And so really it took me like maybe 25 years here at Oxnard before I could like tap into that experience. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but
That was real to me. But
yeah. So anyways, that was my story up to college. I got out of college, got a job fairly quickly out of college working for a finance company. It just was not my thing. You know, sitting at a desk, selling loans, selling insurance. You know, good job, but it wasn't my thing. So I wasn't like, I didn't know what I wanted to do though. And then my older brother was actually a police officer. He was 5 years ahead of me on the job, and he said, "You gotta go on a ride-along, gotta go on a ride-along." I said, "No, that's not my thing, that's not my style." So he finally talked me into it. I went on a ride-along, and I saw like all the amazing things that he did, and the magic that you can do if you wear a uniform. So that day, that ride-along, I knew, okay, this is the job for me. And fairly quickly after that, I put in the application, went into the academy, and that was all the way back in 1990. Yeah, so I'm giving you kind of a long story
this
here.
is good. This
Okay,
is good
all right,
stuff. Keep
well,
on
cool.
going.
So 1990, I started with the Oxnard Police Department, kind of went up through the ranks, did a lot of assignments through all the bureaus. Loved the job, just loved the job, and again, that's where I saw the importance of being connected to the community. Knowing, so I started, I'm in my early 20s, and now I'm a police officer, right? Well, so I'm connecting with and going to calls with like people that I know. That's just the way it is in law enforcement. And you see, when I show up and I know the people that are on the call, and they see me as a police officer, the level of like resistance, the level of tension, just suddenly like goes lower when you know the people, right? When they know who you are, they know your family name. You're just less likely to have any disrespect. Less likely to make a mistake, etc. And so that kind of just underlines the importance of that connectedness to the community. So for me as a chief, that's something I'm always looking for is before we hire somebody, how is this person connected to the community? You don't have to like have been born here or live here, but somehow you got to be connected to the community. So that's something that I really look for, yeah. And so move up through the ranks, I think I'm not sure, somewhere in the early 2000s, I became an assistant chief. So I was an assistant chief. I'd been an assistant chief for 7 or 8 years. We got a new city manager. What was that, in 2014, I believe. And he started having, he kind of shook up the board with, the bosses, and he needed some backup. So he had talked to our police chief at the time, Jerry Williams, and she said, maybe you should talk to Scott and see if he would be willing to help you out. I hadn't even known Greg at that time. So he called me in and said, hey, I need some help. Would you be willing to help? And I said, yeah, sure. And he's like, well, don't you want to know what you're going to be doing? And I said, I don't really need to know because I know I'm going into like an area that I'm not familiar with. But I've been working for the city for a long time, 24 years at that point, and I had a pretty good idea what the challenges are with the city. You're always looking for new experiences, and the reality is the way I was brought up and the way police officers are kind of hardwired anyways. When somebody asks for help, you help.
There you go.
And so that's essentially how I got into city management. I was the assistant city manager for 2 years. Our chief retired in 2016, and the city manager asked me then, would you like to, essentially, I'm kind of simplifying all this, but essentially, would you like to be the chief or stay as the assistant city manager?
Really?
I said, do you really have to ask me that? My heart is with the law enforcement, with the police department, but I have So anyways,
Scott, those sound like very short interviews. You know, mine are like hour and a half. Yours seem to be less than 5 minutes.
I try, because of time here, I'm trying to simplify.
No, I love
yeah.
it. It just like the fact that we did the interview with Police Williams, and when Greg first got here, we were sitting right here, so if you can feel the spirit of 4 or 5 years, and then you're here right now. But that's such an interesting story, and I was following you, but it's nice to know some of the detail.
Yeah.
But if you go, okay, now guess what? You are the chief of police here and the interim city manager. I'm not sure if we say, what are your goals and tasks as a chief of police? Or maybe even more important, I know you're dressed in uniform, but you know some of the goals and maybe some of the challenges as the interim city manager, and incorporate some of the police department goals, maybe how they connect.
I'd love to talk about that. So when council asked me if I would do this job, I said yes, of course. Same thing. I will always step up and help. But one of the things that was very important to me was that I stay as the police chief. So I'd only been the chief for less than a year and a half. That was important to stay as the chief. I don't want to lose the momentum that we have going within the police department. So what does that mean? A little extra work? Yes, of course. But for 6 months, up to 6 months, I could do anything. I could stand on my head for 6 months. So I'm willing to take that on. I talked to my family. We're willing to take that
Smart
on.
move.
The 2 assistant chiefs that we have, Jason and Eric, just solid. They're willing to carry more of the load. Yeah, everybody's stepping up. All the department heads in the city, stepping up. Every single one of them said, Scott, whatever you need, let me know. I will help out. So we have people from throughout the city that are stepping up to help carry some of the load. The reality is I'm not able to be at every single community event that I would like to be at, because there's just too many double and triple bookings. So that is something that I give up. And I told my wife when I became the chief, or when I was looking at it, the potential. One of the big things we have to realize is if you're going to be a good chief, you have to make sacrifices. Different sacrifices than what our police officers make. Our police officers they're always sacrificing, their safety and all of that stuff, the trauma they see out there. Sacrifices you make as a boss are your time. Try to be at different community events, not every day of the week, because you do need some family time, but many days throughout the week, the weekend. So that is a sacrifice. If you're a boss, if you're a chief, if you're a city manager, you just have to make. So I'm not able to be at everything that I would like to be at. We have a great program. It's called drag racing against gangs and graffiti. 2 of our sergeants created this program. They had an event on Wednesday. It was the same day that we were having a special council meeting regarding the potential district elections, and it just broke my heart. As a chief, I would have been there. As a city manager, I have responsibility. So to me, that's one example I like to share with people. You just can't. You can physically. I'm here. I'm not in my office clearing the email, out of my queue. So there is you can only be at one place at a time. So that's a sacrifice. But
there's no clones that we know of.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, there's the flatwood. Have you seen the flatwood?
I was going to bring that up, but you already took it. So
yeah,
no, but you can't be in all places at the same time.
That's right. And so it is what it is. But so how do I make that up? I always felt that as a police officer, the more hectic things are, the more you show up on scene, the calmer you have to be. Of course, because if it's all stressful, if the scene is crazy and you get there and you're all crazy, you're just adding fuel to the fire. You're not calming it. So as an officer, you show up on scene, your job is to take control, and the higher up you go, the bigger the boss you become. Usually you don't show up on scenes unless they're really big, and so you have to be calm, even if you don't know what you're doing. You got to be calm. Same thing with being a city manager, being a chief. The more hectic it is, the more organized I have to be. Because the reality is, I haven't slept much in the last month because I'm like thinking of all the stuff, right? So how do you sleep? How do you fall asleep when you got all these things running through your head? And then how do you, like, when you wake up early in the morning, there's all these things running through your head. You have to gain control of that. You have to be organized. So that's one of the things that I'm doing, is just cranking up that administrative organization and kind of forcing everybody that reports to me to be more organized as well. And again, like I said, I will always go back to this, so many people stepping up, ready to help out. So that's kind of broader picture. Challenges, you know, we're still, and maybe if I could just talk about the police department first.
Yes.
Yeah. So, how do we shorten this up, right? Because it's always, I always see like big picture. Oxnard is a big city. Yes. The 18th, 19th largest in the state. It's considered a big city. There's like over almost 500 cities in the state. So when you compare Oxnard to other cities our size, in reality there's not very many cities our size. There's a few like big city, you know, one mega city, Los Angeles, a few bigger cities, and then a lot of small cities.
Yes.
And I'll just talk about Oxnard in regards to crime. Small cities have lower per capita crime. They obviously generally have less crime, but also less per capita. We talk about crime, we talk about crimes per 1,000 or crimes per 100,000. As cities get bigger, and it makes sense, more people per square foot or per square mile, whatever, you're going to have. When you have more people in an area, you have higher crime rate.
The ratios are going to change.
Yeah, the ratios change. And so when we kind of, from my perspective, try to clump Oxnard in with, you know, compare it to other cities in the county that are smaller, that are newer, essentially younger cities, don't face the same challenges that older cities have. So from that perspective, I think Oxnard gets a bad rap. Biggest city, newspapers, it's easy to report, and we do a great job of sharing information. It's easy to report on, hey, what happened last night?
Right.
You know, there was somebody got robbed, somebody got beat up. You're going to have that every single city our size. You're going to have that every day.
Of course.
That's what you get. And so if that's all you see in the newspaper, and now with social media, you see it, you know, we get this impression like, oh my gosh, it's not a safe city, and that's just not the case. Oxnard is a safe city, but we all have to be smart about what we do.
Oh yeah.
So anyways, that's the backdrop to crime. From when I started in 1990, so basically crime peaked in Oxnard, in California, in the US. It's very similar throughout, in the early 90s. And then in Oxnard, for 20 years straight, crime went down. Down to 2011, started going back up in 12 for a lot of different reasons. We don't have enough time to go into all of that, but one of the things that I'm proud of as a chief, I started in 16, and in 16 we stopped that increase. We had a 7% drop in crime in 16, and then in 17, this last year, it looks like we're going to have right about a 11% drop in crime. And we said our goal was a 10% drop. Looks like we're going to hit 11, and we're just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing to lower those numbers. And I'm confident in 2018, those numbers are going to continue to go down. Some of my other goals or challenges in policing, I won't go into as much detail on these. Traffic safety. I tell our residents you're more likely, and these are things like, you know, you show up, you want to be positive, and then like you're talking about like people getting injured and dying in traffic collisions. But the reality in our city, the average person is more likely to die in a traffic collision than they are to become a victim of a homicide. And that's a surprise to most people. It's a surprise. The average person is more likely to get injured or suffer financial loss in a traffic collision than they are being a victim of a crime.
That's an amazing stat.
Yeah, and but we don't think about it, right? We all just get in our cars and drive, and we don't think about it. And so we're really trying to improve traffic safety through awareness, through focusing in on the areas that we're having the most injury collisions. We still do DUI checkpoints, and you know how hard it is to catch somebody that's drunk driving at a DUI checkpoint. It's so hard because we put out the notice, hey, we're having DUI checkpoints. We put up signs, hey, there's a checkpoint ahead. So if you catch people, we still catch people.
Amazing.
And it's very frustrating. I don't know, we average probably maybe 2 every time we do a checkpoint. And the goal isn't to actually catch people. The goal is to publicize it, to remind people, hey, there's a checkpoint out there, don't do it. But sometimes we'll catch we'll arrest 6 people for drunk driving in a checkpoint. And again, it's nothing against our city. Every city our size has the same problem. And one of the things we're seeing is that the younger population, actually, the numbers of DUI arrests for the younger population, people in their 20s, that's actually going up, and so that is a concern. So we're going to focus in on traffic safety. I talk about that every time we get an opportunity. Another area where we're really going to focus in on, and we have in 17, we're going to continue to push for, is our neighborhood, what we call neighborhood problem solving. We had somebody show up at council last night, and he said, I own a business and there's problems at my business with transients, vagrancy, drug use, etc. And I know the police department is stretched thin, kind of throwing up our hands, and we're not good with that. I will always say our officers, most of our officers just respond from one call to the next. Policing in California, it's kind of you get what you pay for. You have really good policing in California, but it costs a lot of money. So cities our size, we're going to be stretched. Most of our officers respond from one call to the next. That's the reality. And so sometimes you will see an officer that's driving to a call, and somebody might say, why didn't he stop that person for, rolling through that stop sign? Well, he could be responding to a call where there's a victim waiting. So being smart and wanting to be effective with our resources, we have what we call neighborhood policing teams. And so for that particular problem, the way you solve that is letting us know. And so he let us know through the council meeting, but we prefer to go to the neighborhood council meetings. The neighborhood council meetings, there's over 40 of them, depending on what neighborhood you live in. We send officers to every one of those, and we want to hear from the community, what are the problems in your neighborhood? That particular problem with people, smoking marijuana, using drugs, whatever it is, that is a problem that's hard to solve by calling 911.
Yeah.
Because, it could be 30 minutes or longer by the time the officer gets there. He's going in cold, doesn't know by the time, they see the black and white coming. It's hard to catch anybody, so it's hard to solve. But if you talk to your neighborhood officer and say, hey, this is a continuing problem, it happens every day between 3 and 6 p.m., and this is a description, et cetera, then our officers can they can make time to address it. And so that neighborhood policing team, they've been doing amazing work in our city, addressing problems. We say one house, one block, one neighborhood at a time, and they are just the best, and they're doing great work. And then just the last thing on the police department is being engaged with our community. That to me is, one is accessibility. Right. Whether you're the chief, whether you're the city manager, a police officer, a city council member, you have to be accessible
to the community. Partly, I mean, my day is like packed today, but I made
well
time.
scheduled, as they say.
Yeah, but I made time to be here because
Yes.
I can connect with the community, and I appreciate the work that you guys are doing here. We have to be accessible to the people that we serve. So we're looking to how do we engage with the community, like the guy that complained last night about that problem. I appreciate it. I'm thankful that he came up and let us know that, so we have an opportunity to address it. There's plenty of other ways for us to get engaged in the community. You know, we leverage as much as possible. So this is a great example of us leveraging being here. Hopefully you have a ton of viewers. We're out on the radio as much as possible. Whenever the newspaper or television news want to talk about something, we make ourselves available. And then you guys know we use social media.
Yes.
We try to leverage that to connect with as many of our residents as possible. So that's one example of us trying to be connected. And another area where I really try to focus in on is vulnerable populations. And it's an area where it doesn't get enough attention. So who are our vulnerable populations? You know, it's easy. Elderly. We know in our city, every city, people that are elderly are much less likely to be victims of crime. Very rarely are they victims of crime.
Right.
But the fear of crime is high. And so you connect with them, and just knowing, you know, if they know who their officer is in the area, and if they ever have any concerns, they can call the officer. It lowers that fear of crime. Other vulnerable populations, people that suffer from a mental illness. We don't want to connect with them just when they're in crisis and somebody calls 911 and they have a knife. We want to connect with them before there's a crisis. We want to know who their family members are. So that person, their family members can trust the police officer. And so if they have that prior relationship and they're in a crisis, and maybe they have a weapon, they know that there's an officer that cares about them that they can trust. That's a vulnerable population. Plenty of other vulnerable populations that sometimes get as a community sometimes, and I'm not just Oxnard again, as a society I should say, sometimes there's a lack of patience. You know, people that, even with people suffering from mental illness, and I say that phrase purposefully,
right?
Because older terms are that person's crazy or that person is nuts, and those are derogatory comments, and it doesn't show the respect and the challenges that they have and their families have. But other vulnerable populations where there's not a lot of respect for them. Young people. We know that
18 or less.
16 to 24-ish.
Okay.
We know that no matter where you go in our country, that population, that special population, probably has the least amount of respect for law enforcement. They have the most conflict with law enforcement, and it goes both ways.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you have kids, or you're an aunt or an uncle, you know that sometimes there's not a lot of patience for young people.
Understood.
Right? But as a police department, if you can connect with them, and research shows that if people believe that the rules are fair, they're more likely to follow the rules.
Exactly.
Every teacher knows that. In policing, we're starting to figure that out. So if we have a connection, if we can connect with groups of kids, and I'm always looking for groups of kids. Could be school assemblies, it could be after school, like I mentioned earlier. It could be us going to juvenile hall. It could be us going to a continuation school where you can connect with a lot of kids all at once. It's a positive connection. Maybe they change their perspective on law enforcement. Maybe they're less likely to break the rules. Maybe they're more likely to cooperate with us if they see something. So other vulnerable populations, people that are gang members, people that are on probation, people that are drug users, essentially. The old days, the response to the drug problem was you just arrest everybody and they spend time in jail. Well, that changed in 2012, and so they're not spending, drug users, not spending time in jail. And I think most of us know that that's not the right answer, right? But that's the easy answer. As a society, though, we haven't figured out, okay, well, how do we do that?
Yes.
How do we fix that? If it's not jail, how do we fix it? Intuitively, you know, okay, we have to spend some money to do it. We have to have programs, but we haven't gotten to the point where we actually are spending money on the amount of money.
Programs.
Yep. So those are some of the challenges in policing. I'm very excited about addressing those challenges. That's what gets me fired up in the morning. And I mean, I could go into, you know, some of the challenges or you know, what I want to accomplish as like the interim city manager, if you'd like. I don't know if you
I would, and you know, just as kind of a build on what you're saying, I don't know how much you promote the ride-along programs, but I just recently, like 2 months ago, went there and I had a chance to have the empathy and seeing what a police officer does, but seeing how your system and the team works together and dealing with 911 calls, prioritizations, even being in a car, a squad car, where you're trying to get around.
Yeah.
You know, it's not easy.
Right.
And it's dangerous. And I'm actually doing this. So I want to do a shout out just for the officer I went through and appreciation. It was divine because I see you 5 minutes after I get out of the car. So I said, no, there's got to be an interview. But just even transitioning to your responsibility as an interim city manager, do some of the things you do might connect, and again, complimenting you, but it's reality, how you promote, you know, the programs and things like that. I mean, it was funny, but it was real. Again, your clones in the various stores, I thought was effective. You go walk by, my need to want to shoplift just immediately goes away when I go past you. But just how you promote, and I guess I start this off saying the masses so much want to see disaster, catastrophe. They want to see something bad happening. It just seems to be the culture. But then there's forces like you, and maybe some of the things you're doing are more, how do you promote the positive things that are going on in this community? And there are, but then still the things that the masses want to make a big deal out of. Is there a balance between that?
Yeah, so there you said a lot of things. I'm going to try to pick
Sorry
off.
about that, Scott.
No, that's great. I'm going to try to pick off some of the like shorter, easier ones
There you
first.
go.
So and a lot of people have talked about it's essentially the cutout of me. We call it the flat Whitney. And we've partnered with the retailers, the biggest retailers, because they have the highest amount of thefts.
Exactly.
And the goals are twofold. One is to help them lower crime. The other is to help us lower crime.
There you go.
Right? Because lower crime means lower numbers. And then if we have, because of that program, we have 800 fewer shoplifts.
Isn't that great?
800 over the course of a year. That means that every one of those takes a couple hours. So we've essentially like freed up and like an officer time, like an entire officer for an entire year. So essentially that means that those officers that are freed up can spend their time doing other things. They don't have to worry about processing that shoplift. And it's amazing. I don't know how long it's going to last. I hope it continues to last. But
I hope so too.
that program, we saw an immediate drop in shoplifts. Yeah, including yourself. You mentioned you don't do it anymore.
I didn't confess it. No, I love it. They're going to have to refresh because the amount of people who are taking pictures like that, you know, your shoulder is starting to get a little low, so there might have to be a refresh program.
Yeah, the intent was in 2018 we're going to have like a newer, better version. So we're going to use.
I don't know how you do that.
We're going to use other officers. Oh, there's plenty of them out there. There's plenty of them out there. But one of the things that. So I give all the credit to one of our detectives, our property crimes detectives as a group, help drive down property crimes in our city, double digits, and that is hard to do, but one in particular, Lucy Butel, that idea, that was her idea.
Wow.
And she said, hey chief, we want to do this, it's going to help lower crime. And I'm like, yeah, I'm all for it, let's do it. And she's like, okay, well, when are you going to, when do you want to do the picture? And I'm like, oh, it's not me. I said, use somebody else. Use a line level officer. And she goes, no, I think it'd be good if you do it to start. And I was like, okay, I got to put my money where my mouth is, right? So we did it. And the initial idea was kind of like,
use like a stern look, like, hey, keep you from, but I don't really.
So there are different versions of this?
I don't really have
Scott Whitney?
that
Is that
stern look.
cool?
Yeah, and but we wanted to expand that to this idea. No, you don't need a stern look. You have the officer, the uniform, and we want to connect with the community. And so what surprised us the most on that program was just the goodwill that we got from that with the community, and how much that was going to, you kind of mentioned the clone, but that did help us in so many ways, like connect with people in the community. There's people that I hadn't seen, that I knew like 35 years ago. I mean, I still know them, but I was friends with them like 35 years ago, and they come back to Oxnard. I haven't seen them in a while, and they do the selfie and they send it to me. So yeah, that
got around.
Yeah, and that was the subtlety on that. The nuance was just, I think, not having that stern look, but just being a regular person.
I call it the Mona Lisa smile. It's just enough to be friendly, but enough to be, hey, don't take this guy seriously.
And that's what that's like the secret to being a good police officer.
Would the same thing apply to you as your interim? Because that's kind of like where I'm going this thing.
Yeah.
It's the marketing.
Yep.
I hear you empowering people. I hear you saying, you need to get along, you need to communicate, you need to respect each other. Is that the same kind of spirit you're taking as an interim?
Yeah, so there's a lot of overlap between being a good police chief and being a good city manager. There's so much overlap in that. And when you talk about, I try to look at like high level stuff like values, principles, expectations. And for me at the police department, like rule number one, we treat our employees right.
Mm-hmm.
We treat our employees well.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we expect our officers, and it's a tough job.
It is.
Being a police officer. My first week on the job, somebody spit on my face. That's not something you can ever, the academy doesn't prepare you for that. No matter how much schooling you get, no matter how much prep, until it actually happens, so it's a very tough job. And we expect so much out of our officers, and we expect them to essentially always put their needs behind the needs of the community. Mm-hmm. If we expect them this high level from them as an employer, as a police department, or as a city, we have to demonstrate that ourselves to our employees. And so that carries over from the police department to the whole city. Mm-hmm. To the whole city. That's rule number one. Mm-hmm. Probably the biggest principle for me is why did you sign up for this job? Mm-hmm. Don't ever lose sight of why you signed up for the job. So that passion, and I see it every time we interview people, the passion that you have for the job, you cannot ever lose that passion. We all have a responsibility. The city pays us, every one of us, all 1,200 employees in the city, good money to provide good service for our residents. So we cannot ever forget that, lose passion. Talk about the good things that we're doing, and then the higher up you go in the organization, you have to promote that even more. Mm-hmm. And our council meeting ended at 10 last night. By the time I actually leave the council chambers, it's 10:30. So you get home, and then you talk to people on the way to your car. By the time you get home, it's 11 o'clock, and you have to wind down.
Exactly.
You don't go straight to sleep. And then you start up first thing on Wednesday morning, and as a boss, you have to figure out ways to, and hopefully it's just kind of innate, it's easy, but you have to figure out ways to get excited again on Wednesday.
Exactly.
Right? This isn't like a football game where you play one game and then you have another week to get ready for the next one, and then you have an off season. For us, it's just
ongoing.
Yeah, it's ongoing. And so you have to do that as a boss. And as a boss, and this is part of what you're getting at with the police department, changing the narrative, talking about all of the good things that our officers do, talking as a city, the broader perspective, all of the good things that our employees do. There's 200 plus thousand people in our city, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars for the city budget when you include the general fund, 120 plus million, and then the utilities, the business enterprises. You're going to have problems. You're going to have challenges. And we could, you know, it's kind of like your internet connection. If it's operating at 95% of the time you have Wi-Fi and 5% is down, that's not acceptable, right? But there's going to be some downtime. It's the same with our employees. They're doing so much good work. As bosses, we have to like promote that. We have to, it doesn't mean that, so you have high expectations as a boss. Your employees know that you care for them. I always like to compare being a boss to being a parent, like a dad in my case. My kids, they know that I love them, they know that I have high expectations, and I'm gonna, when the expectations aren't met, they self-correct. And sometimes I have to maybe talk to them about it.
Right.
But the kids are committed to doing well, the employees are committed to serving our residents, and so it starts at the top. So I don't know, I could go on and on, but I want to.
That answered what resonated was the percentages. That's 95%. It's now managing the 5%. Like when the internet goes down 5%, what do? If there's 5% you have to deal with, you deal with it, but you promote the 95%.
Right.
And so I'm getting the wrap-up sign that we can't run out of film. That's impossible. But Scott, we could go on. I hope we'll earn a right to maybe schedule something out, talk about a different subject. Let's take this content and let's get it out to the people of this wonderful town we have and the privilege and blessing of living in Oxnard. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I'm going to look at the camera and say thanks so much.
Thank you, Tom.
Thomas, all the people here, but again, another successful version of Good Morning Oxnard. So until then, you take care.
Thank you.